Hi, this is Skeeter Harris with Mac Village Productions, and I'm going to continue my series on desktop virtualization with Parallels Desktop 6 for the Macintosh. I was fortunate enough to have my hands on the product now for the last week and a half, so I thought I'd put together a screencast to showcase some of the new features of the product. Before I start, in the README file there were actually over 50 new features or enhancements. I decided to come up with sort of a top 10, at least in my mind's eye, so I thought I'd review those quickly. So you can read them here, but reduce CPU usage, that's just good. 80% faster 3D graphics, new SATA drive support, which is great, which we'll talk about later, 35% faster, shared folders 200% faster, of course, new support for the Intel i5 and i7 chips. It now comes with both Macintosh and PC antivirus software, which is pretty cool. Parental controls are now integrated into the virtual machines. Windows 2000 Server 8 is now supported. 5.1 surround sound, and now Time Machine actually works with your SmartGuard imaging solution so that you can actually incorporate now your VMs into your backup strategy. So sit tight, we'll go through the rest of the application. So briefly with the Parallels Desktop 6 dashboard, this is where you're going to spend most of your time in the Use Virtual Machines. If you're a PC user and are switching to a Mac, the Parallels Transporter is part of Desktop 6, and this will actually walk you through a wizard of migrating your Windows platform over to a Macintosh. And then lastly, there is a new Windows installation option which will give you the ability to start a new, basically an install of a new Windows product and configure it accordingly. So without further ado, let's take a look at some of these options in detail. So if I click on the use your virtual machines, here are the virtual machines that I've got configured. One thing briefly to show you is that if I'm installing, say, a new version of Windows 7 as an example, if I click on the plus to do that, or I can do that from that dashboard we looked at earlier, it prompts me for the disk. I'm going to skip over this for the time being. But what I want to show you specifically is this window right here. So one of the things that they've done as part of the new features of Parallels Desktop 6 is now the ability to have the installation wizard automatically configure your virtual machine to operate more like a Mac or more like a PC, and you can go from there. So just one thing I wanted to point out briefly before we take a look at the virtual machines. So before we start this virtual machine, what I want to do is take a look at how you can configure it. There are several key enhancements features that have been added to Parallels Desktop 6, so I wanted to at least show those to you to point out why they're significant. So if I click on the little toolbar down here, what I can get to is, first off, if I go to Hardware Settings, what I wanted to point out is under Hard Disk, you'll notice now that SATA as a drive type is an option. That's critical for, one, performance of the VM, but also it opens up additional guest operating systems that would require SATA drives. So that's actually pretty cool. Also under sound, I now have the ability of selecting both stereo sound and 5.1 surround sound. However, please realize that if you're not running either a guest operating system like Windows 7 or Vista, or you don't have surround sound speakers, well, clearly that won't give you that surround sound effect. Under options, a couple things to point out here is, first off, under backup, notice I can now turn on off whether Time Machine gets backed up, but also it's integrated into the ability to optimize and tie SmartGuard into the Time Machine backups, as I mentioned earlier. And then finally, under security, just one more thing to point out is I now have control over if people can go into the virtual machine and exit full screen mode, change virtual machine state, change snapshots. So it gives me the ability to lock this virtual machine down, along with, by the way, as I mentioned at the very beginning of the screencast, turning on encryption. Okay, now that Windows 7 is running in a virtual environment, let's take a look at some of the enhancements to the interface that Parallels Desktop 6 has brought to the table, and then we'll close out the screencast with not only some benchmarks, but also a few summary statements as well. So, what you're looking at here is Parallels Desktop 6 running in actually in Windows mode here. What I can do to change that is I go down to the little selection bar here, and I can click on the drop down. Just to give you an idea, if I click on full screen, you'll see the animation flip that over here in a few moments. It beeps ahead of time before it does it, and then lo and behold, you'll see that that flips into full screen mode. Now, just like in Parallels Desktop 5, you got this dialog box that came up that said, hey, by the way, here's how you get out of the mode that you're in, either with the mouse or with key commands, so we'll close that. But now if I roll up here, what they've done, which I think is neat, is it actually now says window. So as opposed to just that black screen that you saw the last time in Desktop 5, Parallels Desktop 6 actually gives you a window moniker to know what you're doing here. So click on that, and that'll momentarily take me back into a Windows mode. Now, even more interesting specifically is something called coherence mode. You'll notice that in Desktop 6 over Parallels Desktop 5, we had not only coherence mode, but we had crystal mode. And at least in my mind's eye, while I liked both, I felt that it was really somewhat redundant. Really, crystal was a part of coherence. And so in version 6, what Parallels has done is they've actually merged the two and made crystal actually a subset, if you will, or a component to the coherence mode. Again, same kind of interface here with our dialog, just to showcase this. Now, if I go up to the top here, I have a few things plus some new items. If I click on the Parallels menu in the top menu bar, you'll notice I can look at my Start menu. If I click on that, and it will actually load my Start menu for Windows. Also, I can go in here and I can exit coherence. I can actually quit desktop. I can modify and change device settings in here. So some neat enhancements there. If I right click, actually I get the same thing. So nothing new there. Additionally, you get some additional enhancements here. So like if I click on the little menu here, I can actually start seeing some of my taskbar settings. They're actually now running up in the menu as well, which is new to Desktop 6. This is actually a neat enhancement. So whatever you have in your taskbar, it starts showing up here as well. And again, you can hide that or customize that so it doesn't show. So that's neat. Also, at the bottom of the screen, again, this was directly from Parallels Desktop 5. Version 6 continues the same thing where I get my full menu down here of programs in my Start menu, and I can actually launch programs as well. One thing, however, that is new is they expose the computer now so that I can actually launch my computer from here as well, which is nice. And in fact, you can see that I'm running a 2 gig VM configured with the i7 chip, which is what this laptop has in it. Well, that's it for a summary of the interface changes with Parallels Desktop version 6. I did promise some summary and closing statements along with some benchmarking, so let's take a look at the benchmarking first. What I did was I ran this on Mac Pro 3 gigahertz 8-way processor with 10 gigabytes of memory. The VM, however, was configured with 4 gigabytes of RAM and 4 CPUs. So with Parallels Desktop 5, startup times are 48 seconds. Suspend, resume times, you can see we're just under 5 seconds. With Parallel Desktop version 6 IDE configured setup, the startup was 38 seconds, a little bit better. Suspend, same time. Resume actually was slower. Don't know why, but it was a migrated VM. Now, last but not least is the VM configured as a SATA device. So the hard drives are actually SATAs, not IDEs. One point of context that you need to understand is that you actually have to reinstall the VM in order to configure it as a SATA drive. You can't just change the configuration. However, notice that the performance on startup went from 48 seconds in 5 down to 28. Suspend stayed about the same, although resume didn't go down as low as it did with PD5. So I'm not really sure what the difference was between those two environments. But either way, those are the benchmarks. So in summary, my take on this is Parallel 6 really continues to improve really an already stellar product through performance enhancements, certainly enhanced hardware support, which is great for things like Windows 2008 Server and such, along with ease of use improvements, both for the technical resource along with an end user. I think Parallels not only sets a standard here with Parallels Desktop 6, but continues to push the gap further away from other virtualization solutions. So, hey, I hope you enjoyed this screencast and that you found my overview of PD6 worthwhile. Stay tuned, and shortly I'll be doing one on the 80% performance improvement on 3D graphics and really how Parallels does with gaming, specifically on version 6. Thanks again, Skeeter Harris with Mac Village Productions.